Just think about it for a second. A world with no phone, no Wi-Fi, not a single way to send a message instantly across the globe. It's almost unimaginable, right? Well, that was our world until this revolutionary technology came along and literally taught us how to send voices and music through thin air. This is the story of how that all happened.
So, let's get right to it. If I asked you who invented the radio, one name probably just popped into your head: Marconi. But what if I told you the real story is so much more complicated? That it's this epic tale involving a whole global cast of characters, physicists, engineers, and yeah, even a Supreme Court case.
You see, here's the thing we have to throw out right away. That myth of the lone genius having a eureka moment. The invention of radio wasn't a single flash of brilliance. It was a marathon, not a sprint. It was this long relay race with dozens of brilliant minds all over the world, each one passing the baton to the next, building on theories, experiments, and a whole lot of failures.
To really get how this all went down, we're going to trace this incredible story through 5 key stages. We'll start with the pure spark of a theory, then look at how they actually harness these invisible waves. After that, we'll dive into the insane race across the air, we'll find the missing piece that made broadcasting possible, and finally, we'll settle the dramatic battle for the patent. All right, let's start at the very beginning. Before anyone could dream of building a radio, someone had to first imagine that such a thing was even possible. And that journey didn't start in some workshop. It started with math, with equations on a piece of paper.
And that someone was the Scottish physicist James Clerk Maxwell. Back in the 1860s, he came up with these just beautiful equations that predicted something incredible, that there must be invisible waves of energy traveling through space at the speed of light. He realized that electricity, magnetism, and even light itself were all just different faces of the same fundamental force. This was such a profound idea that it's called the second great unification in physics, putting him right up there with Isaac Newton.
But you know, a theory on paper is one thing. Seeing is believing. So a young German physicist named Heinrich Hertz, he reads Maxwell's work and he becomes completely obsessed. He decides he's going to be the one to design an experiment to find these mysterious invisible waves and prove to the world that they're real. And he did it. Using a spark gap transmitter, he actually generated electromagnetic waves and detected them across his lab. He proved Maxwell was right all along. But what's absolutely fascinating is Hertz's own reaction. When someone asked him, "Hey, what are the practical uses for this?" he famously said it was of no use whatsoever. He saw it as this pure scientific discovery, totally missing the fact that he just laid the cornerstone for our entire modern world of communication.
So Hertz proved the waves existed. Awesome. But his detector was just this simple little loop of wire that made a tiny spark. If you're going to build a real communication system, you need a much more sensitive way to catch these invisible signals out of the air.
And this is where the British physicist Sir Oliver Lodge enters the picture. He developed this little device right here. It's called a coherent. And yeah, it looks super simple. It's just a glass tube with some metal filings inside. But this thing was a massive leap forward. It was way more sensitive than anything Hertz ever used.
So how on earth did it work? Well, it's actually pretty genius. Normally, the loose filings had really high electrical resistance. But when a radio wave hit them, they would magically cohere or clump together. And suddenly, their resistance would plummet, letting a current from a connected battery flow through and trigger a signal, like ringing a bell. Then you just give the tube a little tap, the filings would loosen up, and it was ready for the next signal. It was a brilliant way to turn an invisible wave into a real, measurable pulse of electricity.
Okay, so we have a theory, and now we have a detector. The starting gun has been fired, and the race is officially on. The story shifts now from pure physics to the high-stakes ambitions of inventors, each with a totally different vision for what this wireless world could become.
Two people really stand out in this race. On one side, you've got Guglielmo Marconi. He was a brilliant pragmatist, totally focused on one commercial goal: wireless telegraphy. He wanted to send Morse code, dots and dashes, through the air to replace those expensive undersea cables. But on the other side, you have Reginald Fessenden, an inventor with a much bigger, almost science fiction vision. He wasn't interested in dots and dashes. No, he dreamed of sending the actual human voice and music through the air. He called it radio telephony.
And man, the pace of innovation at this point was just breathtaking. In 1897, you have Nikola Tesla filing his fundamental radio patents. By 1901, Marconi grabs all the headlines by sending a very faint signal, the letter S in Morse code, all the way across the Atlantic. Then just 5 years later, something truly magical happens. On Christmas Eve, 1906, Fessenden makes his dream a reality. He conducts the world's first public broadcast of voice and music. Can you just imagine being a radio operator on a ship that night, expecting the usual beep 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 of Morse code, and suddenly you hear a human voice, and then a violin, coming through your headset? It must have felt like a message from another planet.
But there was still one major problem holding back Fessenden's incredible vision of broadcasting for everyone. Sending simple dots and dashes was one thing, but sending a clear voice or rich music, that was a whole other beast. One final, crucial piece of the puzzle was still missing.
The core issue was signal strength. Think of it like trying to hear someone whispering to you from across a giant stadium. The signals these early transmitters put out were just incredibly weak. They faded out super fast over distance, and were just too faint to carry all the complex information in a human voice or a song.
What they needed, the real holy grail, was a way to amplify the signal. They needed a way to take that tiny, faint wave caught by the antenna and boost it into something powerful enough to actually drive a speaker and fill a room with sound. This was the key that would finally unlock mass communication.
And the solution, the thing that changed everything, came in the form of the vacuum tube. In 1904, John Ambrose Fleming created the first one, the valve, which worked great as a detector. But the real game changer came 2 years later. An American inventor named Lee D. Forrest added a third little piece, a tiny metal grid, to the tube. He called it the audion. That grid acted like a tiny gate for electricity. By applying a very small signal to it, he could control a much larger flow of power. It didn't just detect signals, it could make them stronger. This was it. This was the final piece that made broadcasting, and frankly, the entire modern electronics industry, possible.
So with all the pieces finally on the board, radio just explodes. But that, of course, leads us to our final, very messy question. With so many people involved, who actually deserves the credit as the inventor? This wasn't just some debate for historians. This was fought out in court for decades.
And the language from the U.S. Patent Office during this whole fight is just fascinating. For years, they kept rejecting Marconi's applications, pointing to the earlier, more foundational patents of Nikola Tesla. At one point in 1903, an examiner flatly said that Marconi's claim that he didn't know about the Tesla oscillator was, and I quote, little short of absurd, because Tesla's work was already a household word among those in the field.
But then, despite all that, the Patent Office did a complete 180 in 1904 and awarded the patent to Marconi, a move many believe was due to his significant financial backing. The legal battle raged for decades until it finally landed in the U.S. Supreme Court in 1943. The Marconi Company was actually suing the U.S. government for using its patents in World War I. In a landmark ruling, the court invalidated Marconi's key claims, restoring patent priority right back to Nikola Tesla. After 40 years, the history books were officially rewritten by the highest court in the land.
So when you step back and look at the whole picture, from Maxwell's math on a page, to Hertz's spark, Lodge's coherer, the rival dreams of Marconi and Fessenden, to Forrest's audion and Tesla's foundational patents, you see that the invention of radio wasn't a single act. It was a process, a long journey with many crucial steps, taken by many brilliant and very different minds.
Which really leaves us with one final big question to think about. If innovation is a long marathon, and each runner is building on the work of the person who ran before them, who truly deserves to stand on the podium and get the gold medal? Is it the theorist who first imagined it, the experimenter who first proved it, the entrepreneur who first sold it, or the inventor whose fundamental work was only recognized decades later? It's something to think about.